All right. I think everyone is good to go now. Okay, so welcome everyone. Like I said, sorry about the delay. We're adjusting to the time change. My name is Geneva Blackmer, and I am the program director for the Interfaith Center. We're located at the Miami University campus in Oxford, Ohio. And our mission is to invite people of diverse religious, spiritual, and secular traditions to participate in one another's practices in order to cultivate appreciative understanding and to build friendships and relationships, as well as to unify them around common moral, social, and ethical concerns. And we are very happy to welcome Molly Rush here today. Molly is a mother of 6 who co-founded the Thomas Merton Center for Peace and Justice in Pittsburgh. She was born in 1935 and is the oldest of 8 children. She attended the University of Pittsburgh and has an extensive resume of peace and justice activities, including board member of the Catholic Interracial Council in 1963, board member of the Allegheny Council on Civil Rights, co-founder in 1972 and director for over 30 years of the Thomas Merton Center for Peace and Justice, past member of the National Organization of Women, the ACLU board, and the Alliance for Progressive Action board. She is a current member of the South Hills Interfaith Justice Seekers, the Isaac Walton League, Association of Pittsburgh Priests, and Distinguished Daughters of Pennsylvania. She has her nonviolent activism led to several arrests with the River City campaign at Westinghouse Corp in the 1980s and Rockwell International, both nuclear weapons contractors, in the 1970s. She was one of the Plowshares 8, who were jailed in 1980 for hammering on nuclear warheads at General Electric plant in King of Prussia in Pennsylvania. She was sentenced to 2 to 5 years. After 10 years of appeals, they were given time served. Her story was featured in a book called Hammer of Justice, Molly Rush and the Plowshares 8, by Leanne Norman, and the films in The King of Prussia and Gods of Metal, both filmed in the early 1980s. So very happy to have all of you here with us, and so thankful to Molly for being here. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Molly.
Hello, everybody. I'm so sorry I was a little late, forgetting about changing the time here. I just think it's wonderful that Geneva has done this, because it's a chance to communicate when we can't communicate in other ways these days. I've obviously been pretty busy, and I must say I've slowed down recently, but I continue to do what I can. And I feel as though I've had a blessed, blessed life. My 6 children, my 10 grandchildren, and 5 greats. And they're all around Pittsburgh with one exception. So it's a very wonderful life that I've lived, because it's been interesting. And the best part of it is all the wonderful people you meet over the years. That has been my education, truly, and my way of learning about things I read about, but to know people that have been engaged and involved is extremely, extremely important to not only to my life, but to helping to share some of that information as I can. So welcome, everybody. First, I'd rather hear a couple questions, and then I can respond. I've lost the sound again.
Oh, we can hear you. You'd like to hear a couple questions relating to the introduction, or? Can you hear us, Molly?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I was asking if anyone had questions to begin with.
Does anyone have any questions starting off? Jean, I think you need to unmute.
I have a question.
The sound isn't working very well for me. I can hear you, Geneva.
They were muted. I muted them so that we could eliminate background noise, but Jean is unmuted now. Go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
I wondered
how you became acquainted with the Plowshares 8.
That's so interesting a question. I had visited the Jonah House in Baltimore, where Philip Berrigan and his wife were running a real community and hospitality and activism. And that was my introduction to a lot of people. Like I say, I've been involved with the Merton Center and been involved in anti-nuclear protests here since 1972 or so. Rockwell International had its headquarters here and did the B-1 bomber campaign. We did the campaign. They had the contracts. And then Westinghouse was here, and they also had nuclear weapons contracts. So I think through those various campaigns, we got to know different people. Sure. And I was just contacted by one of the members of the Plowshares. Of course, he wasn't at that point. We hadn't gotten together, but I got to know him, and then through him, got to know the others, and we had a retreat and did a lot of prayerful work before we made a decision exactly what to do and how to do it.
I went to the 1982 large march. Remember that one on nuclear disarmament?
Oh, so yeah.
That was a memorable June of 82. Thank you, Molly.
Surely.
Suzanne, did you also have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Molly, I wonder if you might say a word about the heart of activism, or the heart of nonviolence is prayer, and nothing more than, and nothing
if you
more
could turn up the sound a little, I heard part of that question. About nonviolence.
Yeah.
About the basic.
Is this better? Is the sound better? No.
You might be able to turn up your volume on your device, Molly. Like your.
I don't think I can do that very well.
On the top right-hand side panel, you'll see what looks like a speaker with little waves coming out of it. If you have a Mac, I don't know. I used to have a different computer. Now I have a Mac. But right next to where you on/off button is should be a sound. It's a symbol with little waves coming out of it.
She might be on a cell phone or something like that based on the.
I don't know.
Camera. That's okay. Suzanne, could you just repeat your question?
I can hear, but I can't see right now.
Geneva, maybe you can ask Molly if.
Yeah, I can.
If your connection with her is more clear than my connection with her, could you just ask her to maybe say a word or two about does she think that the heart of activism, or the heart of nonviolent action, is rooted in prayer?
Oh, indeed. I think it took a lot of prayers for me to make decisions that I made, because having children, and my youngest two children at the time of the Plowshares 8 were 12 and 15. And I remember having to write a letter to them before I left, because I wanted them to understand that what I was doing was for them and for my family. And of course, for the whole world that was under the threat of nuclear weapons and of nuclear war. And so it was a difficult decision, but I had heard Helen Caldicott speak. I had read much. I had prayed much. I was with a group in Pittsburgh, through the Merton Center that, we held retreats and so forth. And so, prayer has been at the heart of it. And Thomas Merton has been very important to that. He was obviously the name of the center is a Thomas Merton, but that became out of his writings. And we often had speakers come who were very engaged with Merton personally, or who were specialists in his writings. So, the idea of living to be who you are and to live fully through your spirit and for your love has been very much to me. And my mother, I think, taught me a great deal. And that was, I think the beginning of my thinking about, as she said, teach others the way you want to be treated. And so that's been my life. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Molly.
That's beautiful, Molly. Thank you so much.
Molly, we have lost your video. Is there a way you can?
I don't know what happened. I've tried to redo it and it doesn't seem to do that. So maybe I need to.
So I sent you a request to ask you to start your video. Do you see that?
Okay, let me try it again.
There you are. Great. Okay. Looks like we have a question from Linda.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Well, you were mentioning about like the 1970s. I was in Germany during the 1970s, and there was a movement called Atomkraftwerk Nein Danke. Atomic energy, no thanks, and against atomic energy for electricity and things like that.
Mhm.
And a man I knew slightly, he was named Hartmut Gründler. In this protest, he gave the ultimate sacrifice. He poured gasoline over himself and lit himself on fire
Oh,
to protest atomic power plants.
oh my.
Yes, it was about 1978, and I went to his funeral. It was in Tübingen.
Oh my.
That was really sad.
Yes. Yes. Oh boy. Yes, Becky?
Molly, could you talk about how the Plowshare 8 entered into the Westinghouse, wasn't it? Yeah, Westinghouse plant.
You mean the
Yeah,
factory?
you're right. Yeah.
Yes. It was quite something. We did take a ride and see exactly where the building was in King of Prussia. And we had some discussion about, well, how are we going to get in there? And the idea was that we would be at the very beginning of the morning, just as the doors opened. And we would try to get through the door and come in. And actually, it was kind of funny. At one point, we said, well, how are we going to, get through that door? And Phil Berrigan said, well, how about a florist delivery truck? So that's how little we actually had a definite plan. We did know what we wanted to do, and we had our hammers, and some carried little baby bottles of blood. I couldn't see myself doing that. So what we ended up doing was, at the very beginning, when the doors opened, we walked right in, and there was a security guard, and he was about to pick up the phone, and Sister Ann Montgomery and I believe it was Carl Cabot put their hand on top of the phone. And so we walked right by, walked into a room, and it was the non-destructive test center. And there were these little warheads that were no more than, 2.5 feet or something, sitting on tables. And I remember in particular, one was not covered with the coating that allowed it to get through the atmosphere without burning. And that was like a gold colored with little tiny little lines all the way down, and looked very fragile. So I hammered on that, and I got a hole in it, which was, I thought, this is a real thing. This is real. And then there was another one that had the coating, and I hit on that, and you could see dents in it. And you know, it sort of took away all the ideas of what nuclear weapons were, you know, sort of out of reality sort of idea that it was, you know, impossible to imagine. And there were these little cones, nose cones, they called them. And so about that time, they had gotten the security and came in. The others poured the blood and hammered as well. And then, you know, we were taken to jail. And it was a tiny little jail, so we were all in one cell at the time. So first time I'd been in jail with Dan and Philip Berrigan. Anyhow, it really gave us a chance to pray and celebrate and feel that it had gone the way we had hoped it would. So that was the beginning, you know. And of course, we went through trial, and we went through 10 years, almost 10 years of appeals. And finally, it got to the Supreme Court, and it was sent back to the court right below that. And the judge found us time served. So that was quite an experience, as you can imagine. It in some ways seemed unreal, but it obviously had an impact. And we were learning about that as we went. I was sent to jails around the state. I was in 5 county jails all across Pennsylvania. And my poor husband having to keep finding me and come where he did. And he knew I was going to do something. I couldn't tell him exactly what. And he tried to stop me. And he was in contact with my brother, James. And James called the FBI. I learned this later when he very shamefully admitted it to me. And so, you know, he took me out to the diner afterwards and told me this. And I just said, oh, James, you know, I understand why you did it, you know. So it was really a drama in my household and among all my friends and relatives, you know, and it took some doing to help people understand why and how I did what I did. And then to have the courtroom experience where the judge was rather difficult to deal with. And we had expert testimony from international law experts, from Robert J. Lifton, who was he was a psychiatrist, and he explained the whole idea of nuclear weapons, which I think is very important as we think about these things. He had a book, and in that book he described it as psychic numbing, which is what happens to people when they can't take in the fright and the danger that they were imagining or experiencing. And so somehow you block it out. And that has been the difficulty, I think, all of along, keeping people aware of what was going on. However, as you said, there were 1 million people in New York City after a couple years protesting nuclear weapons. I was invited to some protests in Amsterdam, where 300,000 people were marching. I went to the peace camps that women had put up, 5 different peace camps around Britain, because these women camped out to protest the weapons, the U.S. weapons that were based there. So all of this, I think, I learned so much from, and I felt so much support. And it was an opportunity to talk to people in a real way, to help them to understand and get through some of that numbing experience, because you could talk about the reality of what you saw and how you acted. And I think that has inspired the whole Plowshares group there have been over 100 Plowshares actions since then. So I think they continue. Liz, the Berrigan has been, I think she's still in jail, or maybe she's been released by now. But she did a Plowshares action at the age of 80. And so it's been amazing to me. There's some people that have done several. I wasn't able to really do that. It had been traumatic enough for my family to experience that. And I just tried to keep doing what I could doing with the River City campaign at Westinghouse for 10 years. We were there weekly, and we had a new leaflet each week. And we tried to get communication with the corporate executives. And actually, we made friends with the security chief and made friends with this is the nonviolent part of it, I want you to understand. We also made friends with the public relations director for the entire Westinghouse corporation. And at one point, he actually invited me down to speak to all the public relations people for Westinghouse. So that was the major thing, was we did get to meet people within the corporation and explain to them what we were about. Of course, they weren't going to drop their weapons contracts, but I think there was an impact on those people. And we finally did meet with the top officials there. And, it was very, human. And I felt very good about it. In fact, I knew one of the women who was active with the Catholic Interracial Council with me. And so, I've seen her many years later since then. And, we're good friends. We made good friends. So it's been an extraordinary experience for me, because I had no idea if anyone would even know what we were going to do, or what the impact might be. But that was the blessing. That was the blessing, and it was worth spending time in jail. Actually, the Sisters of Mercy and the Sisters of St. Joseph bailed me out after 5 weeks of going to different jails before our trial. So it's reached a lot of people I hadn't expected it to. And there were difficulties, obviously, within my relatives and family, but we've overcome all that. They've become kind of used to me getting arrested. I've been arrested at Rockwell and Westinghouse and a number of other ways. So, but even sometimes when the reporters covered the different protests, they became very interested. And I have to tell you this one because it's so funny. I was in one jail, and it was just a tiny little lockup downtown for a protest. And when I came out, a reporter from the Post-Gazette was there. And I said to her, the matrons are very upset because the toilet is all blocked up, and they can't get anybody to fix it. So the next morning, on the front page, top of a paper, was a picture of the toilet. So the next time I was arrested, the matrons thanked me. So you have wonderful experiences that you don't expect in all this wild and fascinating life. It's been just such a gift, a total gift. And like I say, I've met wonderful people. I'm still in contact with, and I've had a visit from a woman in London who's the one that took me around to the Women's Peace, the camps that were around Britain. And we still get in touch. She visited me once, and we keep in touch on the phone. And she keeps protesting as well. So, and another thing I think that happened, these human contacts, this is what I'm talking about. I went to Europe on a speaking time, and I visited Denmark, where I met teachers who had been teaching in schools all over Denmark during the Nazi era. And they told me that they had been ordered by the Nazis all over Denmark to teach a Nazi curriculum. And they all got together at the same time, and then they mailed letters of refusal at the same time, and they won. So, you think of different kinds of ways that people get involved and can't get involved. And that's what really excites me, is finding how many people have worked in so many different ways. And it doesn't mean getting arrested all the time. I mean, it takes a lot of genuine work, research, education, really training for nonviolence. A whole range of things have happened that have in many ways kept the movement alive, even though there isn't that international protest. But one thing that has happened and that has not been really covered in this country is the recent, in January, the United Nations Treaty to abolish nuclear weapons, which passed and is now in effect. And of course, the United States is in violation of that treaty right now, because we're one of the nuclear weapons nations that have not signed that treaty, but well over, I think at one time there was 102 signatures from nations around the world to abolish nuclear weapons. So that's a sign, we have to get the word out about these things so people understand just exactly how it's become, something that is a worldwide effort now. I see Suzanne Hudson. What are you thinking?
Thanks, Molly. When one does the spiritual, intellectual, emotional, psychological preparation, such as you, with which to engage in the life force that is causing harm to the planet, and be willing to deal with all the consequences. When one does that, Molly, I think it becomes transformative, not only to that one choosing to do such a thing, but to the world. And then other people are inspired by such truth and such action. And then they then choose. Again?
Just as I was.
Absolutely. And I think when I hear you speaking yet another time, I'm feeling that same depth of inspiration and understanding. And so it's a recommitment in ways that I'm able to be yet recommitted. But it's in those one-to-one and sometimes one-to-group interactions that you speak of. It's in the interchanging and how those forms occur that were changed. Do you know? And when you speak, I hear you yet another time, having changed and having been changed again and again and again. And it keeps going on, Molly. It keeps continuing if we're open, aware, alert for the change. Because, ultimately, truth will win the day, but we've got to put in the time for the truth to have the day, So what do you think,
Miss? Very well. Thank you. Yes,
Thank
go
you.
on.
No, so I was going to say, so Molly, what do you think?
I think you put it very well. I think I don't need to add anything.
It's so lovely to see you at the young age of 86. It's the best. You look gorgeous.
Well, we went to Daniel Berrigan's funeral together, New York. And that was a wonderful experience too, wasn't it?
It was just delightful. And I say to some of my friends, you know, being accompanied by Molly Rush, both up on the bus during the burial rite ceremonies and rituals and back on the bus, was a gift that keeps on giving. You know, the stories are the best, just delightful. So thank you for that gift. Thank you.
Well, I don't know that I've gotten there without you. So it was mutual. And I need to say, Daniel Berrigan was one of the very, very special persons in my life and so many hundreds of thousands of other lives. And his writings remain so powerful. He was a poet. He was a wit. He was very, very human and fun to be with, actually. So I think when you meet people like that, it's a very special engagement.
And Molly, it was because of you and Daniel and Philip and all that group of the Plowshares that many of us leafleted in front of Westinghouse in downtown Pittsburgh week after week after week after week and did the civil disobedience. It's like an organic way of witnessing and being witnessed. And I think without that, we don't have what it takes to do what is being asked. Those connections in those writings of Philip and Daniel and Elizabeth were like prophets of truth telling. And wasn't that what was occurring during those days of Daniel's burial rites and rituals? Wasn't that what was those stories after stories after stories? It was breathtaking.
Yes, I go back to the Westinghouse campaign, which brought us very close together, having met at the Friends Meeting House every week for 10 years. And for that kind of work and our planning for the weekly protests and for larger gatherings. And at one time, we encouraged people to make banners for peace. And they connected. There were 1,000 people that participated, and they each had made a banner with a different message or their own, ideas on it. And we went from Westinghouse to the Federal Building to the maybe it was to Rockwell. Rockwell was up that way. And 1,000 people with banners went around. Now that took 10 years of work to pull together and 10 years of community building. And that our little group that met every week, it was a sharing of ideas. And we continue to stay in touch, those of us that are still around after 40 years. And Leanne Norman, who wrote the book, been very, very good friends with her for all those years. And she was part of that group. So, I think that's really important to realize that if you have even just a few people that are willing to put time in on a regular basis and get engaged and become close and allow our spirituality to flow. And that to me is maybe the most important thing we've done. And not long ago, we had a 40th anniversary of the Plowshares, and we did a Zoom event. And I think, 150 people or so got onto it. But we were able, those of us, the four of us who are still around, were able to connect and to see one another on Zoom and talk to one another. And it was an amazing experience too, because I have mixed feelings about Zoom, but you know, on Mother's Day, I can connect with all my family with this coronavirus going on. And so it's, you know, it's that, it's family, it's friends, it's community, and it's persistence. All of that keeps one going.
Thanks, Molly. It looks like we actually have some questions in the chat for you. The first one from Jean asks, how many years did you spend in jail?
I actually didn't spend years in jail. I thought I was prepared that I might spend the next life of time in jail with that case. But what happened was the 5 weeks in jails around the state, being released, and then we were on bail, which had been put up, I said. And we were on bail throughout that period. I think Phil and maybe Dan stayed in jail for some time and didn't put up bail. They were really the hard asses of the group, I think, especially Phil. But you know, it was quite amazing because I was ready and prepared that I needed to leave my children and go at some point. But the appeals continued. We had wonderful attorneys. Actually, former Attorney General came forward and helped us, Ramsey Clark. And so it was quite extraordinary because every hearing, you know, brought more attention and made it possible to find ways to make that a good argument in court. Becky?
And what was that argument?
Well, we
This is a good-
cited international law and that it was illegal to build nuclear weapons, which took all this time, 40 some years, to get around the world, and the UN actually a treaty. So that was one. There were a number of different or arguments that were made, but that was the prime, was that, and the effect on people, you know, obviously the cost, both in tax money, but in what effect it has, you know, in terms of priorities, you know, putting so much money into nuclear weapons while children were hungry. That is not, it's inhuman, truly. So, and of course, the effects of nuclear weapons, that was a huge part of it, was, you know, going down to the nitty gritty and the effects of that. And I was very aware in some way. I remembered World War II. I'm old enough to remember it. I was 10 when it ended. And at one point at the Merton Center, 2 women who were victims of Hiroshima came. They were on a national tour, and they came to the Merton Center. You could see their scars, and they were just 2 beautiful women who just shared that experience, and it was very, very powerful. And then they gave me a paper peace dove that had been folded, and I still have that on my windowsill all these years later. So, you know, having those direct experiences, and I think going back to World War II, they didn't have television then, but they had movies and they had newsreels. And I happened to be in the movie when this newsreel came on that the American troops had freed people from a concentration camp. And there was a picture that was shown of body skeletons that was just a big size pile of skeletons at one of these concentration camps. Well, I was 10 years old, but Never forgotten that. And it really did take a while, but it opened my eye to, the intense problem of the war and so on, Vietnam protests, so many protests around various horrible things that are going around the world. So that's, like I say, it's the personal, it's the understanding, and it's the community that put together the ability to continue for 40 some years.
Thank you, Molly. There are actually there are two more questions in the chat from Amy.
Okay.
If you were to speak with a group of young people, either in middle school or high school, about your experience, what 2 or 3 main points would you share with them?
Well, I think the main point is to convey to them the possibility that they can do something, that it is not something they have to go to jail for, but there's always ways to get involved, to educate others, to reach out to people. And I would share that idea that, there's the terrible things that are going on, but there are also people that are engaged in fighting on all of these issues. And now you see with the environmental movement, some of the leadership that's taken place by young people who are understanding what's going on. And I think in some ways they've built on other experiences that open them up to taking actions. And of course, there are peace and justice programs at various colleges that are obviously, impactful. There was another question?
Yes, the next one was who specific. Sorry, let me just see if I can mute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Who specifically were some of the people that inspired you throughout your journey?
Oh, dear God. Well, beginning with Catholic Interracial Council, the power of that experience back in 1963 when I joined, that opened me up to the idea of working for social justice. And again, that was the inspiration for so much of what I learned in all those years that I was engaged with that. And in fact, the Catholic Interracial Council, the president of the Catholic Interracial Council at that time was one of the co-founders of the Thomas Merton and the first director of the Thomas Merton Center. And it was the Association of Pittsburgh Priests, the Catholic Interracial Council that were very key to starting the Merton Center, and the priests that raised money through their monthly donations was a key part of our having a beginning of income to be able to open up an office and to engage in all the efforts we made, and then building membership. So that's been a constant, and it continues. I'm retired now from all that, but I do keep up with things and do what I can.
Thank you, Molly. So those were the only questions. Oh, no, one more just came in from Michelle. Speaking of the Catholic Interracial Council, please share your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you.
Oh, that's been so powerful. I was able to march in Pittsburgh with the group that are running it, and I've gotten to know Tracy Baton, who's one of the leaders, and it's just been incredible. And in fact, Tim Stevens, who was a youth leader of the NAACP back then in the 60s, is still around and still in leadership of the NAACP. So, yeah. Can you have a further question from that?
Michelle, did you have any Oh, she said thank you for marching.
Aw. Well, that's been fun, I must say. These big marches, have been incredible, and the smaller ones, where you engage with people. And that's the important thing about the marches, not only trying to make an impact. I mean, it takes faith to continue, and it's faith and hope and hope. Actually, hope is the business of taking a step and to build hope within yourself. And as hope is something that you can't see, but is in your heart and remains there, and pushes you towards where you're planning to go and needing to go. So to me, hope is a central concern. And it's a decision. It's not a feeling. It's a decision. And that decision then is to act. And that's where hope persists.
Thanks, Molly. Just received another question. Did you have any experiences talking with Fred Rogers while in Pittsburgh during the years of his children's program run?
Well, I loved that program. And of course, my children watched it. And I actually was on one of the programs at one time. And I don't have a big memory of it, but I remember being there. And then I was at an event in Pittsburgh, and Mr. McFeely was there. And he came over, invited me to meet Mrs. Fred's wife, Mrs. Rogers. And so that's been important. The film was made about Fred Rogers. His spirit, was really built on spirituality and love. And I think that's what we need to do, is teach our children that. And even if you don't have a particular church you go to or particular faith, that whole spirit of love is what's behind it all. And that can be shared even for people who are resistant, I think, to formal church.
Molly,
Yes,
can you
Susan.
hear? In the interest of time, I don't know if you're going to be wrapping up soon or not, but I believe that I read somewhere where one of the Plowshares, who's now older, continues to be in prison and or in a nursing home. Is that, excuse me, Father Cabot or?
For Carl Cabot. Yeah,
Carl,
when we
yeah.
did our 40th anniversary Zoom, he was lying in bed and was part of that. But he'd been arrested over and over and over. The man just kept going back and going back. And now he's in bed in the nursing home, but he still has a spirit. He's a wonderful spirit, has a great wit. I mean, very much fun to be with. And again, that's one of the inspirations I've had is being blessed to get to know some of these people.
Thank
Dear
you.
Carl.
Yeah. What a sweet man. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I just want to make a comment about how.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, I wanted to make a comment about how all of us, I think, during the last 4 years and back some, we've all desired to be able to speak to people who do not agree with us. And Molly, I always think of you and I say, well, how did she do that? How did you sit in front of those executives of Westinghouse? And I've heard people like Jack O'Malley and people tell me how gentle you always are. And I just get furious. So I think you ought to give workshops on how to do that.
Father O'Malley, again, was one of the huge inspirations in my life and a great friend. He just died this past year. But just thinking today of what's going on, I have a niece who was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th at the Capitol building. And I mean, the only word I can use for, which I don't do personally to her, but brainwashed is the only thing I can think of. I'm trying to understand how people are thinking that are so much a part of that. And I think trying to listen, I saw her on Facebook and I just said, Amy, we just have to agree to disagree. I love you. And, I know she's not going to listen to anything I say. And I know, arguing is not useful. So I think just holding on to someone like that is important, even if they don't want to hear anything you say. Listening is very good. And, I'm glad she doesn't have to see my face sometimes when she comes up with something. Because this is either over the phone or, Facebook or whatever, so. But that is, it's very hard when somebody is that totally given to believing what they believe. So, I mean, just listening and knowing you care about them sometimes is the most effective or ineffective, I don't know, but it's an important way, I think, to try to engage.
Thank you.
We are right at the hour now. Did anyone have any final comments or questions? Or Molly, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or to leave everybody with, I should say.
I keep moving my phone.
I have a question. How do you become aware of all these issues in order to even become engaged?
Well, I think it
This
really
is all new
began
to
with
me,
the
so.
civil rights issues, and
All
they
right.
were on TV all the time. And the one thing I remember that really struck me was seeing on television these young people who were sitting in at the lunch counters. And there was one time there were these young men that were sitting in there, and there were people behind them. These different guys were shouting at them. And one guy poured, I don't know if it was ice cream or something down on his head, and just came down all around his face. And that just got to me, I guess, because I started really paying attention at that point. And then to meet some of the people and know some of the people who were engaged through the church, that was a big help. And then finally going to a first Catholic Interracial Council meeting in the diocese building, and that meeting those people, and then finding other ways to meet people and get engaged, because they were very inspiring to me. And that was the only time I'd ever really worked with Black people, and getting to know them and knowing, what wonderful spirits they were. And it was hard not to get engaged.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to me with my croaky voice. I seem to have lost it today.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. Did you have anything to add in closing?
Well, this is an engagement and a conversation that, I think you need to go and have among your friends and ask questions and see how they feel, and see if there's any way to share what you're learning and what you know. And many of you know a lot already.
Well, thank you so much, Molly, for your time. And thank you to everyone who joined us on Zoom and Facebook and YouTube. And the video will be available on our YouTube page. I know someone had asked me about that, as are all of our programming. So I encourage you to share this information around. And I'm just really grateful for all of your time. And I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you so much, Molly.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Geneva, for putting this together.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you very much. This was wonderful.
So glad that you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.